I realized the biggest impact I can make, actually the most lives I can save, is by making doctors financially free, and that's how I make my impact. Because think about it. If you're going to a doctor, your doctor works 3 days a week. She loves it, right? She spends a day reading all these medical journals, goes to these conferences, and just has a great life, compared to, say, you have a surgeon and he's working 6 days a week.
You found the Real Estate Law Podcast, because real estate is more than just pretty pictures, and law goes well beyond the paperwork and courtroom arguments. If you're a real estate professional or looking to build real estate expertise, then welcome to the conversation and discover more at realestatelawpodcast.com.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Law Podcast. Thank you for listening to us today. It's Jason Muth here, along with attorney broker Rory Gill from Next Home Titletown Real Estate, Urban Village Legal in Boston. And Rory, I am clearly the least educated person on this podcast today with the amount of intellect that we have. We have such an amazing guest. And Rory, I'm going to have you introduce Dr. Pranay Parikh, because, man, I was looking at your bio and I was listening to your podcasts, and it just fascinates me, the story that you've put together. And I can't wait for you to share everything with our audience as to the niche that you've discovered here in the real estate world. Rory, go ahead. We were talking about Dr. Parikh earlier.
And you were also, you introduced yourself as being the least educated here, but you probably may have taken the most direct route into doing real estate investments and doing investments. A lot of overeducated sometimes don't get to. But today we have Dr. Pranay Parikh on, the MD to entrepreneur. He is the founder of Ascent Equity Group, and he speaks to people, encourages people, particularly in the medical profession, to get involved with investing and addressing the unique opportunities and challenges that group has. So I'm really excited to welcome him onto the podcast and to provide some value for all those, particularly professionals who are looking to get involved in investing.
Thank you too. You guys would be surprised, maybe not Rory, but how often someone comes up to me and be like, Pranay, can I really get into real estate? I'm just a doctor, or I'm just a lawyer. And it always blows my mind, because at least education wise, you're probably one of the most well-educated, but it's, a lot of times we believe that we don't have it in them. So, it's my mission to show people that you can do this, and you can be successful in real estate or really anything else. It's just, you got to believe in yourself, and people think that just because you've had the success in one thing, that they have all this confidence and belief in themselves. But, it's not true. Or maybe it's the exact opposite is true.
Tell us a little about you first, how you got into the medical profession, but, relevant to this podcast, what were the revelations that you had that brought you also into doing real estate investing?
So, I'm Indian, and all Indian parents want their children to go into, medicine, law, or engineering, but really medicine is the big one, and my dad faints at the sight of blood. So he promised his mom that his kids would go into medicine. And fortunately for them, both my brother and I are doctors and really enjoy it, so that's kind of how I got into medicine, just really enjoyed it and really like understanding how things work, and what better to understand than your own body, right? It's nice to know. Actually, sometimes it's not nice to know all the different things that can go wrong, right, with you, especially once you get children. I've always been curious, and that's really, that kind of carried along to real estate, right? Eventually going to have to buy my house, so I should still learn it, and after I graduated residency, so became a full-fledged doctor, I looked around and I was like, okay, I can invest in the stock market and wait 30 years to enjoy my labor, which I've already been in school for 20 years, right? Another 30 years sounds like too long. So let me go out, find something that I have direct control over. And that's how I found real estate.
Being a medical doctor is very incongruent with the financial independent retire early movement. Probably a lot about FIRE. I was pre-med back in college, and a lot of my friends were of South Asian descent, surprisingly, right? They all went to med school. I was competing with them. It was very challenging. I did not go to med school, though I took the MCAT and decided it wasn't right for me and found my way into a different path. Here I am today. But I know that med school is, 4 years of strenuous studying and then 4 years of an internship at least, right? So you're talking about people at the very earliest, unless you're Doogie Howser MD, 30 years old, and you have a degree and you've gone through 4 years of residency, and you probably have a lot of debt, and you're about to kind of start your career, when people in the FIRE movement are looking to wind their careers down at age 30, right? They're looking around that age 35 or so to say, hey, I'm retired early and look at my passive income. So, and this is a relatively new thing, right? Like, the FIRE movement's been around for about 10 years or so, but the medical profession's been around for far more than that. Where does that all fit in with your peer group and people that you went to school with, people that you network with now? Do you see people that are coming out of med school, coming out of their residencies and saying, geez, I have all this debt. I'm about to make a ton of money, work very hard. But what are all these other friends of mine that have these other passive investments and they say they're going to retire early now? Where does that all fit in?
Super painful. So I grew up in the Bay Area. So pretty much everyone worked for Facebook, Apple, and you hear the stock market going down, but over the last couple years with stock options, people have made millions. People are 5 to 10 years ahead of me, but it's also job satisfaction. I go to work and I make a good living and I make a difference in the world. It's kind of rare to have both those. And even the real estate, I realized the biggest impact I can make, actually the most lives I can save, is by making doctors financially free. And that's how I make my impact. Because think about it. If you're going to a doctor, your doctor works 3 days a week. She loves it, right? She spends a day reading all these medical journals, goes to these conferences, and just has a great life. Compared to, say, you have a surgeon and he's working 6 days a week, or he or she, 15-hour days, which is the one that you want taking care of you, the one that's kind of laid back, financially free, the one that's there because they love it, right? So that's my goal, to help separate the money and the medicine, right? Just like in law, a lot of people would love to take these cases that, probably don't pay that well. And that's how they make a difference. It's just, you still got to take care of your family. And we can take the money out of medicine. I think the world would be a much better place. And we do that through real estate, but you can do that through venture capital. You could do it through entrepreneurship. We've kind of mixed both the entrepreneurship and the real estate. But there's, plenty of ways to do it. That's how we're helping. And it's not going to be a, get rich quick scheme. It's going to take years, especially syndications we hold for 3 to 5 years. But now people are looking to hold longer. So, 5, 7, up to 10 years. So it'll make a difference. But, and I gave a talk about this at a conference. You don't need to replace your whole salary. When I ask people how much passive income you want, they'll take their salary, say, 240,000, divide by 12, and they say, okay, I need 20,000 a month, right? But you don't necessarily need that, because real estate, and I know you guys talk about this, is very tax advantaged, right? And for us in California, you're getting up to 50% more by getting that money as distributions. So the amount of money you need overall is a lot less in real estate. And really, you could make substantial changes in your life by really making extra 10, 20, 30,000 through real estate a year.
I bet you that you have a lot of colleagues that you just mentioned that you spoke at a conference or speak at conferences. I have a feeling that you're touching people who are doctors and you're having light bulbs go off constantly. People that are probably in their 30s, 40s, 50s that have just been practicing medicine for a long time, that it never occurred to them that this could be something that they could be doing with their money. We all know about 401ks. We know about the stock market. Real estate could be esoteric if you're not really digging into how to make money on it. But when you start hearing about people making money on the side, you probably get curious. But as a doctor, you're likely just so focused on your profession, right? So tell me about the types of people that are having those conversations with you after you get off the stage, saying, I never thought about it that way. Like, who are those people?
That reminds me of one person that I talked to. He's 51 and a cardiologist. So, cardiologists make like 400 plus thousand a year, right? That's significant money, even if you live in California, New York, right? But he's like, yeah, I don't have much in savings. I have this house. I think he had a boat or maybe 2. And you don't think about that, right? You think about this salary and you're so used to it that you're expecting it to come every so often, right? And maybe you have grandkids and you want to take time off. You realize you haven't taken a vacation in 10 years, right? And life isn't guaranteed. I think with us doctors know that, but we forget it. My wife had a best friend who passed away at 34 from breast cancer, and it's rare, but it happens, there's nothing she could have done. You don't even do mammograms till 40 at the earliest. She passed away pretty quickly, about a year and a half after she found it, and she went to Stanford. They did all the chemotherapy and all that stuff. So, life isn't guaranteed. So I think people need to have plans to enjoy life. Earlier this year, my son was an infant and we went to vacation, small vacation. People were like, why are you doing it? The plane ride's going to suck. It did suck. But, after we got there, it was fun. And, he's not going to remember any of it, but we are. We have these great pictures, great memories. And that way, over time, it's against a fire to take this extravagant vacation along the way. But, people, I see this all the time. People work so hard. They retire 50, 55. Maybe they don't have their health. Maybe, they don't have kids, are out doing their own thing. I think it's really important to build in almost safeguards, but moments of escape along the way.
Mm-hmm. When people work very hard in a traditional W-2 job, or if they just spend so much of their time and energy focused on managing their investments, it's easy to forget the why. Why do we do this in the first place? Why are we working? And you've already eloquently pointed to a few things. If you believe in your job because you get to go to work and make a positive impact in the world and save people's lives, that's some psychic rewards right there unto itself. But if that work can become destructive, even investing can be destructive to those ends if you don't get to see your family, you don't get to make memories, you don't get to take a moment to look at life. So when we put together all these bits of financial advice, we have to remember why we're doing it in the first place. It's for our families, it's for our interests, it's for whatever it is for you.
Yeah, and the 40-hour work week, it was for farming, right? It wasn't made for us, and I think for most people, 40 hours is too much, right? It takes us away from families, and then don't even get me started on commuting. Fortunately, for most of my stuff, I have like a 5-minute commute, but the average commute is half an hour each way, right? So you're working all this hard, and a lot of people will come up to me and they'll be like, hey, I hear real estate's great. Should I go out and buy properties? That is a great way to make wealth, but it's really a second job. To do it right, you really need to own 10, 20, 30, 40 units to make an impact. And at that point, you're creating a business. You got to market, you got to hire people. And the question is, if you really want to value your time, is that something you want to do? Sign up for a second job. For some people, I call it burnt to a crisp. They're so burned out that they're willing to put in as much hours into something else that they can because they want out as quickly as possible. For those people, it might make sense. For the rest of us that still want to work, but maybe just a little bit less, I don't think getting something that's going to become a second job, unless that's what you want. There's some people that do short-term rentals and you can create a lot of wealth through it. It's just, you got to treat it like a business.
Yeah, that's where we are right now. At least I am. I mean, I worked 27 years in media related jobs, both on the research side and then sales management side, a couple things in between. And yeah, I was done. I just was done. This summer was my last day at work and we'd already started building up a portfolio of short-term rentals. And then we just kind of accelerated that a little bit more this year. And I always wondered in the back of my head, what would happen if I had all the time in the world to do this full time, right? So I'm at that point, you just kind of mentioned it, where creating another job for yourself. Right now, that's where we are. We've created companies and another job for myself. And that's fine. I don't need to have a 4-hour work week. We've all heard about the podcast and the books about that, where everything is automated, you offshore everything and you go golf all day. I'm not there yet. I still enjoy being hands-on a bit with what we're doing. But yeah, if I reach that point of 10, 20 properties, we're at 7 right now, 5 short-term rentals. It's right now close to the breaking point of, yeah, I probably need a little bit of help. But, we're not there yet. Right now, it's fun. And part of work is supposed to allow you to earn money to then enjoy your life. That's part of what you've discovered early on in your professional career. And that's what you're helping other doctors do. It's what the FIRE movement's all about. I follow the Financial Samurai. Do you know Financial Samurai?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's out in the Bay Area too. And, he put it very starkly, like, figure out what the average age is of when the mortality of a adult male, 78, 80 or whatever, 80 years old, subtract your age. And that's about what you have left. Like, how much of that time do you want to work and how much do you want to enjoy your family and the rest of your life? And, when you think about it that way, you're like, oh my God, I should have retired 10 years ago. Frankly. So tell us about the podcast, From MD to Entrepreneur. It's a fascinating little angle that you have where your audience, I'm guessing, is it mostly doctors that are saying, what is this other doctor doing? I trust him because he's a doctor. I'm a doctor. But now he's an entrepreneur. Like, tell me about your audience. Tell me about the, the genesis of that podcast.
So most doctors don't feel like they can do something outside of medicine because you've sacrificed so much, right? Through college, you took all the pre-med classes, you didn't do any humanities, or you really tried to do the least amount outside of medicine as possible, right? And then you get into medical school, and you literally don't do anything but medicine for 4 years. And then same with residency, right? So your skills are very deep in medicine, but it's very shallow elsewhere, right? And this is one of the goals of the podcast, is to show people that what you've been through really makes you a great entrepreneur. Persistence, being able to learn. The human body is very complicated, and we had to learn every single aspect of it, right? The hours, the due diligence, like it's just all these skills where you get refined through fire, make you a good entrepreneur. But what is the biggest issue for most of us is perfectionism, right? So in medicine, you don't take a class unless you know you're going to get an A, right? And you don't raise your hand if you don't know the answer 100%. But that's the antithesis to entrepreneurship, right? You try something, you fail, you try something, you fail, and you try 15 things. Even if even one of them is successful, you're set, right? You don't need to have all of them be a success. But if I had 15 patients and only one of them survived, that'd be a bad thing, right? So it's switching your mindset, and a lot of times when you see someone like yourself doing these things that you want to do, you're like, oh yeah, if he can do it, I can do it. And I can tell you most of my audience are much smarter and more capable than me. So my goal is to just show them that I can do it. So I interview people that have been doing stuff interesting in entrepreneurship. Recently, I interviewed someone who was an ultra marathon runner. For some reason, he'll do 100 miles at a time. And yeah, that's like me in a year, if that. But it was just interesting to get into his mindset, right? It's like, how do you push your body to do that? And, maybe we can use those same skills to lose a couple pounds, to help ourselves be less procrastinators. So, just interview interesting people and give people like the real truth. I interviewed someone and we talked about how entrepreneurship is super lonely, right? Especially now from work from home. We're all small business owners where, it's just us or maybe our spouse or maybe a couple of virtual assistants, and it can get pretty lonely. And it's hard, especially when you get a setback. It's really hard because you don't necessarily have someone to commiserate with, and especially us professionals, people say, oh, why don't you just go back to medicine? Like people don't understand entrepreneurship. So trying to, inspire people, give them the tools and tips of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, you mentioned loneliness with entrepreneurship. It's why mentorship groups, meetup groups, masterminds, networking groups, conferences are so important for people that are going out there doing it on their own, because they realize there's other people out there that are also doing it. And, usually people in the real estate world, I found, are not sniping at each other. Everyone wants to help each other. At least they want to help with information, whether it's an ego thing because they know something and they want to tell everyone about it, or they just want to talk about all of their properties and how many doors they have and how much wealth they have, or they just want to legit share knowledge with somebody that is just a couple chapters behind them in the book. It seems it's been a very giving group from what I've seen. Not to say that like the workspace that I came from wasn't, but it was a little bit more political and competitive. But then again, you have a built-in network of people. Like, do I miss my coworkers? some of them. Others, I don't really think about it all. But, I have a whole new set of colleagues and coworkers now. It's people like yourself, people that come on the podcast, people that I meet at conferences, people that are in my mastermind, people that I can network with who, are doing the same exact thing that I am, just for their own individual company, right? And that's what entrepreneurs do. They find people that they can learn from. They find smarter people, right? Just like what you're doing. Like we bring smarter people like yourself on the podcast. You bring smarter people on your podcast. We should get your guests on this podcast. They'd be the smartest people in the world. How long into your career do you think that you discovered that this pivot was something that maybe you wanted to have made? Because when you come out of med school, you match the program, you're a resident for 4 years, right? Were you a 4-year resident or longer?
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
From that point onward, like where do you think you said, geez, maybe I don't want to do this for 30 years straight and only this?
Before you get into medical school, they want you to be well-rounded, not just, taking bio and chemistry all day. They want you to be well-rounded, done leadership, volunteering, and all this stuff, right? But they beat it out of you when you're in medicine, Well, for me, it wasn't ever beat out, I was walking the halls of the hospital while I was a resident, and I saw a bunch of art. So I talked to my program director. I was like, hey, who gets to decide who this art is? Can I be on that committee? And I could see him like visually like try to slap me in the back of the head. So he's like, this is not what residents do, right? And I was applying for fellowship at the time. They're like, you need to focus on this one thing, applying for fellowship, which I ended up not getting because my CV's all over the place, which was probably one of the best things that happened to me. But I've always been interested in a lot of stuff, and then finally when I graduated, I could take up some of those, and I got a twofer, right? Because not only is this stuff really interesting, but I'm taking control over my financial life, and a lot of us professionals, we just co-opt it to someone else, but no one's going to care about your money as much as you are, and at least in the beginning, you have to have enough education so that you can tell that they're managing your money well.
We're talking a lot about the cultural headwinds that doctors face going into entrepreneurship and investing. But there are some advantages that medical professionals have in the space too. Can you tell us, what are some of the advantages or some of the things that help them stand out when they get into the entrepreneurial space?
So having that ability to persist, in residency, I used to do 80-hour weeks. We used to do a couple 36-hour shifts in the intensive care unit. We're the sickest of the sick patients. I actually work nights. I still work nights, but most people would say nights would be horrible, right? It's just totally against your body, right? And so I think having that, plus there's this level of trust that a lot of physicians have gotten, and tell people we do real estate in the way we do medicine, integrity, transparency, honesty. And that gives us a lot of benefit of the doubt. In real estate, you mentioned the network. It's a really small world in real estate. Once you get to a certain level, there's only a handful of people out there. And when we partner with people, we'll tell them, hey, we'll bring 15 million to the table, $15 million in equity, and they're trusting us, right? And they have maybe $1 million hard, meaning they have $1 million in the deal that they can lose if we don't live up to our word, So trust and faith and connections are super important. And I think just the profession helps us with that. But I think a lot of the graduate degrees, lawyers plus or minus, some of them get a bad rap, but other professions definitely, and lawyers as well. Like I'm in almost daily contact with our security and exchange lawyer, and they have opened a ton of doors for us because of who we use and their reputation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you're talking about that, different professionals here, when you kind of break out of one silo and kind of see the world and the other professionals that are out there in different fields, the opportunities are a little bit more endless. As you've grown with your investing and everything, tell us a little bit how you put together your team, because, you're still a doctor, you're still a very busy person, and you can't manage everything on your own. How did you go about building your team?
The important thing and how I really started is partnerships. Someone that you trust 100% with your business, which is it's like your child, right? It's something that you put your sweat and equity in, that eventually it'll become something big, right? So there's two other founders, they're both doctors, and we just have this connection that all large decisions we make, everyone has to agree with. We have some pretty intense arguments, but in a great way. And I think that safety is super important, where you can speak up and say your mind. Sometimes, a lot of times I get my opinion changed because someone just makes a great argument. So started off with three of us, and then just very slowly hiring for people that have a culture fit, and over time, just like we've learned what we needed, so we've been moving people around like a chessboard, and in the starting, everyone was kind of a generalist, and we also had a ton of contractors. So we brought in generalists on hired, but when we on Upwork, you can get insanely complicated. Educated and successful people for relatively cheap. So we can get underwriters for anywhere from $200 to $400 an hour, which sounds like a lot, but they're only working hourly. So you can get a project done in 2-3 hours, when if you were paying them full time, most of that time would be dead time, and your cost would be a lot higher. So we have an army of underwriters and different contractors. Now we have most of that in-house, but we still use them for them to double check our stuff, so it's nice to have kind of triangulation. But I think contractors, especially when you're starting, if you're a solopreneur, I think that makes sense. And we have a bunch of virtual assistants in the Philippines that are just amazing. And so there's a lot of ways to make it work, but you have to know that if you get someone like that, or if you get someone that's a generalist and not an expert, you're going to be paying with sweat equity, right? You pay either in sweat equity, or you pay in actual equity, which is money, or potential future profits. So we try to find a good number that works, and then we're willing to put in the time it takes to train people, because eventually when they get trained, they'll, and you have a good employee culture and all that stuff, then, hopefully they stick around forever.
So I'm on the website right now for Ascent Equity Group. When did you start this? What year?
So we started in 2020.
Okay, so this is 2 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, 3 years. We're almost going to turn the page now. This will come out in 2023.
Yeah.
As of right now, 6,892 units acquired, 1.207 billion in assets acquired. That is jaw-dropping for that short amount of time that you've built all this while being a doctor during a pandemic. How did you do that?
With a lot of help, So in the starting, we had this other brand, right? So a lot of people see that and they're like, wow, 2 years, that's amazing. But, we're like an overnight success that took 10 years in the making. So there's this other company that my partner owns and I help with called Passive Income MD. And it's kind of like this podcast. It's basically working with doctors and educating them about real estate and entrepreneurship. So, that company is about 5 years old. And so we started on the 50-yard line because we had that built up. So for your audience that wants to do anything at all, it's not build it and they will come, right? It's build an audience. You can take them wherever you want to go. So before I know you have a lot of young professionals as well. So before you know what you want to do, because, it took me a while to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I actually first thought I was going to build a real estate empire of just myself, not syndications, not big apartment complexes, just, single family homes. I'd buy a bunch of them, but I decided, I hated that. And I like working with partners. So, but if you build a podcast, you build a blog, you build a YouTube channel, then no matter where you go, you could take like 70, 80% of the people there, right? Because they know, like, and trust you. So, a lot of people are asking me, where would I start? If I had to do it again, I would start the podcast a lot sooner. I had some imposter syndrome. You guys talked about how nice my background is. That's because for a year, I just kept researching best microphones, best background. And I just kept buying stuff and researching. And eventually I ran out of stuff to buy and research. So I had to start my podcast. So start it as soon as you can. It doesn't have to be a podcast, can be a blog, YouTube channel. Video is really hot right now. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, you don't need it to be super polished. Just go out and start it. And so start whatever you want. And then eventually when you figure out what it is you want to do, you'll have an indwelling audience. And that's just so much better than starting a real estate company and then going out to find people to invest with you.
Yeah. I mean, that's partly what we've done also with this podcast. We launched this in 2019 and did 8 episodes and then put it on the shelf when we had a baby. And then we relaunched it last year or so. I don't know. This is episode 80 something. We're consistent now. We release every single week. We're up on YouTube. We're on social media. We, publish audio across platforms just like you do. And the audience just builds and builds and builds. I mean, I'm not one to just stare at the stats, but you start to scratch your head and say, well, who are all these people who are listening to this? But you realize that you're touching a number of people for a variety of reasons. I mean, we probably have some folks just like you that listen to every episode. And there are some that probably just find episode number 64 because of the guest, right? And they listen to that episode and then maybe they stick around afterward. But it builds up that credibility that you were talking about. I mean, I can imagine there's probably other people in the space that are doing something similar to what you're doing. I don't know that for sure though, but if you are going to be raising money for syndicated deals like you're doing, and you have this expertise as a medical professional, know that you know how to speak, to other doctors about what to do, and you understand the pains that goes through their every day, and you're helping them plan for the future, it gives you so much more credibility also that you're probably able to, just say, hey, go check out my website, check out my podcast. I'm one of you, and I'll help you through this if you're looking to make some money, passively while you continue with your career. It's such a great strategy.
I actually want to flip the content question around just a little bit. So if I were working with my agents and they wanted to generate content that might help them get the attention and trust of doctors who are looking to invest in real estate, what are some tips from them to make the connection from their profession as a realtor to some doctor investors out there? What are some things that they might want to hear?
My sister-in-law is a real estate agent, and I have been begging her to put out some content. A lot of times, and not as much anymore because I don't do single-family homes, but someone would ask me a question and I'd ask her and then parrot back what she said, and I would look like a genius, And I was like, you are so smart. You have all these skills. Just you need to find a venue to put it. So I would say take a look, or maybe even ask all their ideal clients, right? So maybe they're doctors. What kind of questions are they asking? And then find a venue that you can do, right? Everyone wants to be on YouTube, TikTok, but are you going to be consistent? You talked a little bit, Jason, about consistency, right? What are you going to be consistent with? And the nice thing about TikTok, for example, is it doesn't have to be super polished, right? You have to use your phone. You don't necessarily need to use this elaborate setup that I have. Or do you like talking in podcasts, right? Maybe you interview your clients and talk them through the buying process. So I would say find your ideal clients, ask them, start keeping track. I have this little FAQ. If they ask me any question, I just write it down, right? And then you can even, I would say for your agents, just you can make a quick little poll thingy on Instagram, even their personal Instagram or their Facebook page. Just be like, hey, what are the top questions you have about the real estate market, right? And take those and then make videos or make some kind of content, either blog posts. I would do video. Video is really hot right now. Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and you're just much more likely to get found. And then just be consistent, right? One a day, or maybe one a week. and then do 2 a week and 3 a week. I promise you're not going to have issues with content pretty quickly. But it's all about consistency, right? And trying to find that ideal client and trying to get in their head, like what would they want? For example, most doctors are busy, right? And so if I really wanted to attract doctors, I would work off hours, right? 5 to 8 p.m. Right? I'd work Saturdays. I'd work Sundays. Sundays especially because most clinics are closed Sundays. But you got to do something different. If you want to be successful, you want to be way more successful than everyone else, you have to do something different.
Before we get to our final questions, I want to ask about passive income MD. Is there a passive income JD out there coming? Something
there isn't, but there are a bunch of people that have been asking about it. So if you want to be the one to start it, let us know. We'll be happy to help out.
Yeah. Hey, let's partner up. That could be our next big idea, right? We'll just jump on your back because you've already figured it out. But no, in all seriousness, there's a lot of parallels, right? Between people in the medical profession and people that are attorneys who have, lots of loans, lots of years of education, maybe love the profession, but also would love their own time back.
And as he said earlier, just the commitment you've undertaken this many years and you've incurred this debt. You feel very committed to the profession and inflexible with how you imagine your career moving forward. So I think that's a pretty strong parallel between two very different professions, but there's a stickiness to the field that I've noticed among my peers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are kings and queens of sunk cost. That we have spent so much time doing something that it almost feels like a waste. But I promise you that whatever skills you've learned, like, for example, I'm actually envious of lawyers and their ability to intake documents and reading and be able to ask great questions. I actually look up to lawyers and their ability to question people, but not in like the crime and like that, but really probe, I think is such a unique skill set that they've learned, and to consume these like gargantuan legal documents, that skill is really transferable to anything, right? To be able to consume and pick up the important points and all this like literal gibberish. Like I've read our PPMs like page to page. It doesn't mean anything. Here and two, there two, four, like understand why it needs to happen. But that's such a unique skill to be able to write eloquently. And specifically, that's one huge thing. I'm very envious. You're able to write so specific. Anytime I have an email to our lawyer, he's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, I literally do you not understand the English language. He's like, no, like, what specifically do you mean in this scenario? But I think that's a unique skill to be able to read and write in that way.
I just wish we could turn off that sometimes, because then we read some emails the wrong way.
Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah. But my sales background, I talk to Rory all the time. I'm like, are you sure you're reading the email the right way? Like, read it with a different tone. And I think that's what they're trying to say.
For sure.
We'll get to our final couple questions, and then I'd love for you to tell everybody where they can find you, reach out, maybe invest with you, or learn more about you. We'll obviously put everything in the show notes, with great links back to your websites and whatnot. So, Dr. Parikh, we ask these questions of all of the guests that come on our podcast. We'd love to hear the answers that you have for these final three questions. First of which is, if you can get on stage for a half hour and talk about any subject in the world with zero preparation, what would that be?
Impostor syndrome. I think this is really the bane of all our professional experience. And, like there was a story about one of the head doctors for UN, and she was just talking about like having to get in front of these people, and she's at like the pinnacle of her career, and having to do that. It's something that we all face. Every single one of us has to do it. Ed Sheeran, the famous singer, he had this song that's had like 2 or 3 billion plays, the most plays ever, and he said when he first wrote down that song, he was like, this sucks. Like, he literally said, this sucks, Fortunately, like, no one came up to him and was like, yeah, that does suck. And he would have just thrown it away. And now it's billions billions of plays, right? So I think the world would be a better place of all these people, because it's the people that feel imposter that we really need more of, not the people that are out there, just like, I'm the best, I have no faults. It's the people that are questioning themselves that really have the difference to make in the world.
That's the tricky part, because there's a lot of imposters out there who are legit imposters, who people are listening to and haven't really been doing that or talking the talk or walking the walk, whatever the phrase is. But you're right. There's people that probably have imposter syndrome saying, well, what do I have to say about that subject? But they're the best ones to talk about it, right? Great answer. Second of the final questions we have for you. Tell us something that happened early in your life or career that impacts the way that you're working today.
So I think a lot of people will probably be able to take things in their life and see little forks, right? This happened and this was a complete fork. So one day after residency, pretty much right after residency, I realized, I was like, I'm going to take control of my financial life, right? I didn't think, just like everyone else, I was not good at numbers. I didn't know about finance and all this stuff. So I said, hey, if there's a doctor conference or meetup, I'm going to be more involved, right? And I was part of this doctor Facebook group, and someone said, hey, anyone in Los Angeles? And then I replied, I was like, I live in Los Angeles. I will host an event. I'll pay for it. I'll clean up. I'll do everything. I just want to be involved. And my current business partner, who's relatively big deal at the time, reached out to me and said, hey, want to get on the phone? And our very first conversation was 3.5 hours, And it was lucky that he's a dude. My wife would have been like, who are you talking about? Yeah. Like twirling your hair and all this stuff, But, we instantly connected, and we hashed out all these like business plans and all this stuff. And it was that distinct decision, like, hey, I'm going to really take control of my life and just put it out there into the world, because you never know what's going to happen. I didn't know that my partner was going to reach out to me, but it was just intentional decision to really, really increase the surface area of my luck, right? I mean, that was lucky that he happened to be on at the same time, saw it and all that stuff. But, and that's the one time that sticks out in my mind, but maybe I did that a bunch of times and none of them hit. But it's just doing that often and doing it with intention.
I've never heard that phrase, increase the surface area of my luck. I love that. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So, you have luck, and you always see some people that are just really lucky, right? Like Mark Cuban, for example, or Richard Branson, right? But it's because they're doing so much and they're failing all the time that over time, they're increasing the surface area, right? And one of those things could be lucky. It's kind of like your tongue, right? Your tongue, you can't really see it, but it has all these little things, and it's like this. And then when you zoom in further, it's like this again. So it's all these little areas that just increase the surface area. And one of those, the delicious taste is going to hit that, and you're going to be like, yeah. But if you just had a block, like one little block, then the chance of that hitting is pretty low.
So you knew we had to get some medicine involved, some physiology, right? Human anatomy. Final question we have. Tell us something that you're listening to, watching, or reading these days.
Yeah. So this, I get this question a lot, and I like, there's always all these books that people recommend, Who Not How, and, The One Thing. But this is different. This is called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And what it is it's a collection of words in different languages. And, you always, a lot of times you'll have this feeling. I like the word angst because it just encapsulates this like feeling of uncomfortableness when you're expecting something to happen. But so it collects words from different languages just to describe kind of the human emotions, And so like, hoggled, shocked upon looking twice at something you see every day and catching an obvious detail that you've never noticed before. All right. So it's just full of different words that kind of describe the different feelings that we go through, and a lot of times aren't able to put into words.
It's like Schadenfreude, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Heard of,
yeah.
Right.
Or déjà vu, right?
Déjà vu. Yeah. I just heard, was it Freud and Freud? I don't even know if it's a real term, but it's basically the opposite of Schadenfreude, if that's indeed the thing, where it's not taking pleasure in someone else's discomfort, but taking pleasure in someone else's pleasure, right? So maybe somebody made that up.
Yeah.
Growing up, I used to buy these books. You're probably a little too young for this, but there was a show on HBO back in the 80s called Not Necessarily the News. And they had a segment called Sniglets. And sniglets were words that were supposed to be words, but just weren't, right? They were just, they were funny. It was a funny thing. It was a comedy thing, but it was as if this was a word and it was defined. And it's almost similar to what you're describing here. I mean, these are obviously words in other languages that express a complex thought that we just don't quite have in our language. And that's what a sniglet was trying to be. But this, I'm just on the website of it right now. This looks very similar to that, where you could learn words in Korean and German and Italian that we just don't have in English, but have this complex thought to it. This is a fascinating potential read.
It's something that I just pull up every so often. But yeah, it's interesting because especially being able to dig into different languages. So, for example, in Spanish, the word for wait and wish is the same thing, and that's just such an interesting idea that if you're wishing for something, you're waiting for it to happen, right? And it's like,
is that esperar? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know that many languages. I'm sure each of them have like an interesting kind of abstraction or kind of root word for us to think about.
We'll talk about imposter syndrome. I took 1 year of Spanish and somehow remember that word from 15 years ago. And Rory studied in France. He doesn't like to talk French, but he understands it more than he cares to admit. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate it. Pranay, can you please tell people where they could reach out to you and learn more about the work that you're doing, how they can invest with you, how they can learn from you, all that great stuff?
So our website is ascentequitygroup.com. You can sign up for our newsletter where we post about deals, talk about deals. I go on like webinars and Zoom all the time, talking about the market and kind of where we are. And then my podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's called From MD to Entrepreneur.
And you're still practicing medicine?
Yep.
40 hours a week?
No, I've had to cut down. I was doing most of that until a couple months ago. Now I'm about 3/4 full time. So it goes by shifts. I do about 10 shifts, 10, 12-hour shifts. So
yeah,
about 40 hours for 3 weeks.
Well, I think you have more than 168 hours in your week somehow. You have about 340. I don't know how you do that, but good for you. That's great. Hey, Rory, where can people find you?
People can find me through my law practice, Urban Village Legal, urbanvillagelegal.com, or through my real estate brokerage, Next Home Titletown. That's nexthometitletown.com.
They could find you right here. If you're in South Boston, come stop by right here on A Street. And if you want to reach out to me, Jason at nexthometitletown.com. I'll see your email. If you want to be on the podcast, reach out to me. If you have comments from this episode, shoot me an email or leave them on the YouTube page. We love reviews also. Hopefully they're good reviews for our podcast. We appreciate hearing from our audience. And if you have any questions for Dr. Parikh that you can't quite get a hold of him, we will do that. Thank you so much. I don't even know is it Pranay? Should we call you that? Or should we call you Dr. Parikh? Dr. Pranay Parikh? How would you like to? Yeah. All right. Good. We're old friends. Pranay, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast. This has been a enlightening discussion. I really think you're doing some fantastic work in multiple ways, not just in the medical field, presumably, but with your colleagues, and really helping them along and say that there is life after practicing all this great medicine, which we need as a society, and keeping their sanity and remaining financially stable for their families too, because that is very important. We've been through a very, very difficult past couple of years through COVID, and the people in the medical profession deserve all the credit in the world. So thank you for appearing. Thank you for all your work. Rory, thanks for being our co-host.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
You found the Real Estate Law Podcast. Because real estate is more than just pretty pictures, and law goes well beyond the paperwork and courtroom arguments. If you're a real estate professional or looking to build real estate expertise, then welcome to the conversation and discover more at realestatelawpodcast.com.